Thanks to a prisoner exchange by the Trump administration, a literal convicted murderer is now a free man in the interior of the United States. Now, follow along as I go through the details of this insane story. Now, who are we talking about? Well, back in 2016, a United States Army veteran by the name of Dahud Hanid Ortiz killed 3 people and was in fact convicted of killing 3 people. The New York Times reports that members of the Trump administration even knew that Hanid Ortiz is a murderer prior to this prisoner exchange. So before we explain how Hanid Ortiz was freed by the Trump administration, let's actually explore his crimes. So he killed 2 women in Spain back in 2016, and he also killed a man that he mistook for a different man by the name of Victor Salas, whom he believed was having an affair with his wife. We'll get to Salas again later in this story. Now, after these 3 murders, Hanid Ortiz fled from Spain to Germany, and then he eventually ended up in Venezuela. And Venezuela is the country that eventually ended up trying him, convicting him for said murders, and he was sentenced to 30 years in prison for the murders. Now, Hanid Ortiz is actually a dual Venezuelan and American citizen. He had served 19 years in the army and was even awarded a Purple Heart for his service in Iraq. Now, in 2023, during a different prisoner swap, the Biden administration passed up the opportunity to bring Ortiz back to the United States. According to the New York Times, the official said that the Spanish authorities had asked the United States to send him to Spain, but that Spanish officials ultimately decided against this, and the Department of Justice decided it didn't want him in the United States. So since he was convicted in Venezuela for the 3 murders that he had carried out in Spain, the US under the Biden administration was perfectly fine leaving him in Venezuela, where he is also a citizen, to serve out his sentence. But now fast forward to modern days, the Trump administration, which decided to go in a completely different direction. Earlier this month, the Trump administration exchanged 252 men that it sent to El Salvador for 10 Americans and US permanent residents that were imprisoned in Venezuela. So the idea was, hey, Venezuela, we sent a bunch of Venezuelans, hundreds of Venezuelans to El Salvador. We'll now send them to Venezuela if you return 10 Americans and permanent US residents. Now, Ortiz happened to be among them. The murderer who was convicted of killing 3 people was among them. And here's what the Times reported just last week in an anonymous source who spoke to them. When the Americans put Mr. Hanid Ortiz on a plane on Friday back to the United States, at least some people in the Trump administration knew of his criminal past. And by the way, Victor Salas, who we had mentioned earlier, the individual that he intended to kill, but ended up killing someone else because he mistook him for Salas, says, if this wasn't a mission, please make amends, because it not only endangers me, remember, Ortiz wanted to slaughter this guy. It not only endangers me, but all Americans, because they are faced with a murderer who killed 3 innocent people without any qualms. And look, it is important to note that many of the prisoners in Venezuela were in fact wrongfully jailed, but that is not the case. In this particular situation, that is not the case, okay? So for instance, 8 of the 10 US citizens and permanent residents released on Friday have been declared wrongfully detained by the State Department. Hanid Ortiz has not been declared wrongfully detained, according to one of the people familiar with the case. So the US government acknowledges that this was a rightful conviction for murder as it pertains to Ortiz. Cenk.
So if Trump had sent back the undocumented immigrants who are criminals and closed the border, on that issue, his popularity would be around 80%. He's now significantly underwater. He's unpopular on immigration. Why? Well, there's, in my opinion, 2 parts to it. One is way too extreme. Like the American people said, look, all these folks coming in here in a way that's undocumented, or some of them will say illegal, right? I don't really care about the words. is too much, too extreme. We don't want that, right? Now, Trump swings not to the middle, but to the other extreme and goes, I'm gonna set up alligator Alcatraz, where I'm gonna feed them food that has maggots in it. I'm gonna keep the lights on 24 hours, which is a form of torture. I'm gonna do all these things, and I hope they get eaten by alligators. And yes, there's some 20% of voters who go, yes, but that's the radicals. The other 80% are like, what are you doing, man? I didn't sign up for it to be some sort of weirdo torturer, right? I didn't vote for you because I wanted people eaten by alligators, you moron. I just wanted you to close the border. I was gonna give you credit for it. I wanted you to take out the criminals. I was gonna give you credit for it, right? But now he's unpopular on immigration. I can't, after he basically in essence closed the border, I can't believe he got to an unpopular rating on immigration.
Yeah, totally.
You have to like bungle it all over your face to get to that point.
And what's the consequence of that, Cenk? And it's important for those who are in favor of these deportations to understand this. The pendulum will swing right back to the other extreme. And that's why we never have any functioning, well thought through, well thought out immigration policy in this country. The pendulum just keeps swinging from one extreme to the other extreme, one extreme to the other extreme.
And by the way, we never actually solved the core issue. Why? Because corporations don't want the main issue being solved. They want that cheap source of labor. So it never gets solved. It just has it get into a political hot potato that goes back and forth and causes damage on all sides.
I have to add more to that because just recently there was a marijuana farm in California that ICE raided. Now, through their raid, they found out that this marijuana farm was employing minors, undocumented minors. Okay, so the undocumented individuals get arrested, but what's really fascinating to me is even though labor laws were being broken, even though this farm was employing undocumented people, including undocumented minors, did the owners of the marijuana farm, did the employers here face any consequences? Did they get arrested? No.
No.
And that's what's really interesting about how our government responds to issues pertaining to immigration and deportation and all of that. Why is it that the employers who are knowingly and wrongfully employing people who are undocumented, even minors who are undocumented, not facing any consequences for this? Fascinating.
Yeah, so I talked to a Latino guy today in LA that I known for a bunch of years. And he was saying, we were talking about, I said, look, if they go after the undocumented guys who are criminals, nobody's gonna object to that. And he was like, wait, I don't get it. Why would anybody object to that? Why is that even being discussed? Like, of course, take out the criminals, right? He's like, but now we're in a situation where, when the protests happened in LA, ICE went and did a provocation and attacked basically the citizens. And then a bunch of idiots came out and looted, and I asked him about that, and he's like, what does that have to do with protests? No, you should arrest all those guys. They're just, he's like, I saw them, brother. They had Mercedes, they had Range Rovers, okay? He's like, it has nothing to do with Latinos. It has nothing to do with immigrants. It's criminal gangs that go, oh, there's a protest. I'm going to take advantage of that to go and steal stuff, right?
100%.
And so, by the way, when you arrest those guys, you're not hurting the protesters. You're helping the protesters because they're the ones who smear the protesters and have nothing to do with them, right? So, okay, so this is what reasonable people think. Now, the second thing that I mentioned as to why Trump is becoming unpopular on this issue is because of Trump himself, because he's so obsessed with protecting his own ego rather than anything that he actually promised in policy, that it leads to this extreme, where he's bringing back a murderer. He's bringing back a murderer just so he can say, I was right. Yeah, I did this, I sent them to a dungeon in El Salvador and I got people back, I'm a genius. And who'd you get back? Oh, I got a triple murderer back, yeah. What?
Crazy.
That was the exact opposite of what you were supposed to do.
The guy is a free man within the United States, domestically. Okay, how is that acceptable? How is that okay? That is not okay. We engaged in a prisoner swap in order to get that guy back so he can be a free man after he murdered 3 people?
So to review, we sent hundreds of people to they were tortured daily in that prison in El Salvador.
In Sikot, yes.
Yeah, okay. 70% of them had no criminal convictions or arrests or trials, okay? So just grab a bunch of people, 30% of them are bad guys, good, I'm glad to get rid of them, right? 70% we don't know anything about. Let's go torture them in a foreign dungeon, right? And then in return, we get back a killer that is on the loose here in America.
No, thank you.
How is that in return? How is that in return? So this doesn't make any sense. And that's why Trump is losing popularity by the day and now by the minute. Every time you ring the bell below, an angel gets his wings. Totally not true, but it does keep you updated on our live shows.